Habemus Papam, Jennifer.
Habemus Papam to you too, Greg.
Aren't you supposed to say, and with your spirit?
We have a Pope.
I mean, but last week we recorded a show. Hold on, we're going to pour coffee, so you have to hear the noise of the carafe. Boy, that did a burst of, that was like the glaucoma test at the eye doctor I just gave myself with that thing. And we did a show right as the conclave was beginning. I did not think that anyone expected the conclave to go as fast as it did. But I was pretty freaked out when the white smoke started going, because I was expecting a longer conclave, and it kind of worried me that if they did it that fast, that meant that there were, you read so many theories, not conspiracy theories, but theories, and people trying to figure out how this is going to go. And everything I read was that if it was super fast, then it was sort of like pre-decided. There was a group that was making things happen versus something that felt more Holy Spirit led, if that makes sense. And so when it happened so quickly, I was like, oh no, men got
all the melancholics of the world.
Men got in the way.
No.
Well, no, it felt like men got in the way of the Holy Spirit almost. Right. But then since then, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Well, before we go too far in that, I think it's really fun to ask the question, where were you and what were you doing when the white smoke came out?
Yeah.
So for me, I was actually working at school. That was one of my school days. And I was already aware of the conclave schedule, the fumata schedule, which means, smoke release schedule. And I knew that around 11:30 would be when it would be close to when another smoke could be released out of the chimney.
Eastern time. So
I was sort of looking at my school schedule, say, well, where will I be? Okay, that's going to fall right around my lunchtime. And so I had my phone propped up while I was eating the lunch I brought from home to school. And I just was eating my lunch, staring at a chimney and the occasional seagull.
On your phone.
That was also on the roof next to the chimney, but all through my phone. I just had it all on the screen, and I'm just watching it literally with every bite of food. I'm just watching this chimney.
Those are now the most
That's it.
Those are now the most famous birds in the world.
Oh, for sure. And I was so grateful for those birds, because it reassured me that it was in fact a live feed and that it wasn't a frozen image. I needed to see the movement of the birds. And so I'm watching it, and all of a sudden I saw little wispies coming out of the chimney, and I was like literally losing my breath, because there was a couple other teachers also in the lounge having their lunch, but they were not watching the feed. Some were grading papers, some were just doing other things. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's this? And of course my voice gets high pitched. And then I was like desperate to see the color. Can I figure out that color immediately? And I started, it's like, okay, that looks white. That looks white to me, but what if I'm wrong? And so I held up my phone to the other teachers in the room, and they're like, no, that looks white. That so looks white. And so we're all like amazed that we were catching it within seconds of that smoke being released, and how fun it was to just know we have a pope before we were hearing it echoing in the halls of the school, which I have to say was a super cool experience to be in a Catholic school. Like, for a time such as this, like, what a fun place to be, to witness such a global event as this, and to share the news with all the students. And you heard it all traveling in the hallway. We have white smoke. And then we're like realizing this is going to change the schedule of the day. And we could, because that's a call we can make as administrators in the school. Like, we can change it. We don't want to waste this wonderful opportunity in our faith to really share the joy with the students. It's like, this is the moment. This is such a huge moment for us Catholics. And so before, too much time had passed, we had already started to prepare the assembly room. We pulled down the large screen. We ran the feed to be on the large pull down screen. And then we started inviting classes and teachers, like, if you can, send them all into the assembly room so that we can watch who will emerge on the balcony, who would be the cardinal that would be elected the supreme pontiff for this next chapter of, the church's history. Like, who will this man be? And we're just that feeling of anticipation. But, we're all experiencing it in different ways. Like some families are together, some families are separated during a moment like this. And so I knew where I was and I knew where Lily was, but I really had no idea what anybody else in my own family was doing.
This is the third papal election since you and I have been married. And this is the third time you and I weren't together to see it. So it's like
the timing, you can't really predict the timing of such a thing.
Well,
so what were you doing?
I was on the computer and I had it in the background. And so I heard the screams from the crowd at St. Peter's and I flipped over to that video, but I had it running in the background with the sound, and then just hearing the cheers, I knew right away, you kind of lose your mind a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I ran downstairs. I started crying. I kind of I wasn't ready for it. Like I said, it's because I was expecting it maybe in 2 more days. I was really expecting a long conclave just for various things that I'd read. And I kind of sobbed and I just wasn't ready. I hate to admit it, I was a little afraid of who was going to be selected. There were some cardinals that kept being brought up in the media as their darlings. And even if you try to ignore them, it still gets in your head. And I was really concerned about a few of the cardinals being elected and just not knowing how would I deal with that and that kind of thing. And so again, it's hard. Admittedly, it's hard not to be selfish when you start to see something that's going to directly impact your life. You're like, okay, well, what's this guy going to do for me? And I don't think I was thinking about it directly in that way, but emotions sometimes act of their own accord. I mean, that's what makes them emotions. They're these things that are emoting from within you. You don't sit there and go, you know what? I think I'm going to say I'm going to be sad right now. It's sometimes
you don't choose it. Sometimes it chooses you.
and in that moment, I was a little overwhelmed for about 10 minutes, maybe. Sat down. At the moment, it was a little worrisome. The 45 minutes it took for Francis to come out, 45 minutes for Benedict XVI to come out. We hit 45 minutes and there was no movement, starting to wonder what's going on. In the days since, let me say, one of the reasons I read why it took longer, it took over an hour from the moment that the white smoke until
he emerged.
He came out. We heard Habemus Papam. Do you know the reason why it took so long?
No, I never bothered to really look into it.
Okay, so let me back off.
And is it true? Are you sure this is a true reason?
If it's not true, no.
Who reported it?
I don't remember, but I have no reason to believe it's not true because it makes sense. It logistically makes sense. Pope Leo XIV is a learned man. He has degrees in mathematics and philosophy. He is an expert in canon law. Canon lawyers, I've worked with canon lawyers. J.D. Flynn and I worked together at the Archdiocese of Denver. J.D. Flynn from the Pillar. J.D. was my first experience. No, that's not really, a guy named Pete Very. I don't know if you remember Pete. He was one of the first people that we ever interviewed on the Rosary Army Podcast. Mm-hmm. Pete was a canon lawyer. He wrote a book called Surprised by Canon Law years and years and years ago. So I interviewed him. Pete was my first introduction to understanding canon law, but J.D. was like a crash course. Going to lunch with him, he was just sort of like, it was canon law by a fire hose when it comes to JD. He takes it so seriously. And so I heard JD saying something, just talking about canon lawyers tend to be very precise. They follow what the church's laws are, what their teachings are, and they're precise in communicating them. And I'll just tell a story about JD Flynn. One day when we went out to lunch, it was JD, the communications director, and I. Do you know what the story is?
No,
okay.
But
well, hold on. It ties into it. Okay. It does tie into it. I made the comment that I could teach anyone how to play the piano, and JD got really up in arms about this because I might have said I can make anyone a pianist. And he says, no, you can't make anyone a pianist. You might be able to teach them to play a few chords on the piano, but that does not make them a pianist. A pianist requires certain things to, so even that argument with JD was a very concerted, precise statement that he was making. It took Pope Leo the 14th so long to come out because he was writing his first statement.
Oh.
He was scripting it. He wanted his words to be precise. And when he came out, they were. And they were immediately, to me, encouraging. And then after that, his first homily at his first Mass the next day was written out. He was concise. He was very particular. And it worked out that, everything that he said was very, very specific, very concise. Same thing when he later on gave his first address to the College of Cardinals. When he just yesterday, as we're recording this, he gave another address to the media that were gathered in Rome these last few weeks about their responsibility in communicating to the world. I, again, don't want to be throwing negatives out there at all, because the preciseness with which he is speaking is also very positive. But Francis oftentimes spoke from the hip. He just what he wanted to say, he said it. And that oftentimes led to, well, what did that mean? Granted, Pope Leo hasn't even been Pope for a week yet, but he hasn't said anything yet that confused me, that made me go, wait, what? Everything is very, very precise. And that to me is just, it makes me feel like I'm hearing the Father that we talked about last week, right? In the last show, where we want to have a Papa. We want to be led. We want to have clarity. We want to be fathered. We want to be, we want to be cultivated in a way that we feel like all children are being pulled in the same direction. And so that precision, I think, was just pretty great. And so I don't begrudge him for making me wonder what's going on. Why is he taking 15, 20 minutes longer than his predecessors did?
Well, that does certainly make a lot of sense, because that was a question I had along with a few other people. Like, when did he write that? Do you have to have that acceptance speech sort of written on the chance you might be elected? I mean, like an acceptance speech for an Oscar. Yeah. If you don't know you're going to win it, you need to be prepared to say thank you, even though you may not ever read that speech out loud. So I didn't know how that was timed out or when it would be, in fact, prepared. So that does explain it. It's been a joyful ride ever since that day, May 8th, when he was elected. I have been smiling more. I feel like every day I learn a little bit something else about him, but I have to admit I'm being very, very careful to stay off the internet, because it is insane. The comments that are out there that are going like crazy. Everybody is scrambling to know, who is this man? Who is he? Is he my guy? Is he not my guy? Should I like him? Should I hate him? Everybody's so used to what the past 10 years have done. We're so used to being fractured that we want to look forward into the future through the lens of being fractured. Like, it's so hard to imagine being unified. What does that feel like? How can there be a pope that both the left and the right both like? Is that possible? And then when we went to Mass this past Sunday, I loved how our priest sort of brought back a centuries old concept of the center, and who is in the center but Christ himself. So if you're on the left or the right, you're not in the center. You're not in the center at all. And so it's a call to all sides, politically, whatever. You need to look at where you're standing, where you are standing. And if you want to be where Christ is, then you got to get to the center where Christ is. So I love how it's an equal call to both sides. You need to just reevaluate your position and get to Christ's position. It's the only position that makes sense, is Christ's position. Get to the center and don't worry about the direction you have to walk to get there. Just get there.
Couple things. For someone listening, and they might have the hairs going up on the back of their neck when they hear you saying center, because they might immediately associate that terminology with political leanings. When you move to the center politically, then that means that you're going to be forfeiting some significant thing on a political side, right? If you go to the center in terms of the abortion argument, that leaves openness for abortion. If you move to the center on, so you get the point. I mean, that's a great
It's like a loss and a gain.
Right.
You're going to give up something to gain something else.
And I did read one. It wasn't a commentary on. Well, it was sort of on Pope Leo, but it was very much on what may have happened in the conclave, because and I found some of the editorialization of the process kind of interesting, in that even though the doors closed and they met, it wasn't as if that's when the meetings began. The meetings began as soon as Pope Francis died, and if not before. There were meetings happening that were discussions between the cardinals of who are we going to move forward, and if this person doesn't go, then who's next, and who can meet, and a big thing that apparently was happening was, from the outset, they were already discussing who can be the unifying pope. Who, if Francis was brought in to make changes, particularly within the Curia of the Vatican, and clean up some of the administrative aspects of it, which was a big part of it, and then he brought in some of the things from the Latin American world into it. Well, and I think that this was a fair assessment. He did come in with, there's certain ways that things were done in the Latin American church that were foreign to the North American church or the European church, and he brought them in as if you're just going to accept them, and your way is no longer around, right? And so for many people, it was disconcerting. Well, okay, so he brought that in. Could we have someone who could bring in the old church, traditional aspects of it, the Western world that we know, the different aspects of the world, and bridge now, versus actually unify these different things? And I kind of like that idea, because I've never seen, again, we mentioned this in the last show, I've never understood why Pope Francis took issue with the traditional Latin Mass. We have all these other beautiful rites of the Catholic Church, the Byzantine rite, the Melkite rite, all these beautiful rites that have liturgies that are all within union. But for whatever reason, he took umbrage with the traditional rite, which was never meant to go away. Even though the Novus Ordo was introduced in the early 70s, the intention was not to completely obliterate the old rite. And so, is it possible to have a pope that can actually say, no, these are all part of our church, that this is Catholic, right? And so here's, again, someone with precision and someone who communicates. I also really appreciate the fact that Pope Leo XIV, just a few years ago, 2014, I think it was, he became a bishop for the first time. And he apparently refused the offer to be bishop 2 times before that. And so he's not someone who's a political, or a career priest, right? He didn't go into this. There are some priests that they have the track, right? I'm going to be a priest, and then I'm going to be a Monsignor, and then I'm going to be a bishop, and I'm going to be an archbishop, I'm going to be a cardinal. I mean, they got the track already laid out for themselves. And he wanted to be a priest, and so he spent time as a missionary. He spent time in the Curia. He spent time in parishes and in dioceses. And so he has a sense of all these different aspects. And so he can also communicate with the priests and leaders that are in those different aspects. That's really encouraging to me.
And that's very Augustinian.
Very Augustinian. Okay, so let's talk about a few things right out of the gate. What do we like about Pope Leo XIV? What is struck? I actually did an interview the other day, so I had to do a bit of research. It was for a TV station in New York. And I watched the first homily that he gave, like right before I went on the air with this TV station, and the homily that he gave, as well as the other addresses that I mentioned, he's mentioned St. Augustine several times, and you can't summarize St. Augustine very easily, but the way I do it, I think about the author Louis de Waal in his book The Restless Flame. I always was intimidated by St. Augustine. I always thought he was too smart, and I'm too stupid to understand him. And then, I don't know, 15 years ago, whenever it was, I read The Restless Flame, which was a sort of a novelization of the life of St. Augustine. And I realized, this guy was a terrible sinner and a complete jerk in his youth. Now I can relate to him.
That's where we bond.
I just needed to know that he was as terrible at one point as I am. And so when I saw that, then it gave me hope, and then I can start to absorb Augustine's teachings and how, Augustine to me is just the greatest example of a sinner brought to God. The fact that here we are, hundreds of years later talking about him. So there's that aspect of him, but there's so many other aspects that I think probably attract Pope Leo to him and to the Augustinian order. But I think, that's one part that I love. I love the fact that almost immediately people uncovered interviews with then Father Provost, Prevost. I can't. It doesn't matter. Pope Leo.
Yeah.
When he was just a priest back in 2012, right? So a year before Pope Francis was elected, 2012, the new evangelization was still being talked about. The new evangelization, which was promoted by John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and in 2012, Pope Leo gave a talk, and it's an amazing interview. I'll try to find it, put a link to it in the show notes. So if you're looking at YouTube, just look down below, where he talked about the responsibility of media, but also Catholics creating media, of our need to stir up mystery. And he said this in a few different places now. It's already getting mixed up in a good way, I don't know if he said it to the media yesterday or if it's this old interview, but he talks about how so much of the media that's out there right now that we can't even compete with. There's no point in even trying to compete with the secular media, which is primarily spectacle. And I love the fact that he differentiated between spectacle and the Catholic media that can be produced that can stir up mystery. And mystery is more attractive in the long run to spectacle. If you can draw people to mystery, they're going to linger in it. It's going to become more pervasive in their lives. And so that is already so
that's speaking to you.
That's speaking to me. Mm-hmm. He's addressing media issues, and the fact that he took the name Pope Leo XIV and Pope Leo XIII wrote 12 encyclicals about the Rosary. So, like, if you look at the show that we did last week when the conclave began, we said a Rosary-loving Pope, our hope for the next Pope, that kind of thing. He hasn't talked about the Rosary yet, but when he first came out in the loggia, before giving the Urbi et Orbi, the papal blessing to the world, he asked everyone to join him in praying a Hail Mary. So he hasn't spoken of her yet, but I believe that's going to come very soon.
I wouldn't be surprised if he promotes or reinvigorates interest in consecration.
In consecration, in the Rosary. I mean, all these things I think are possible, that Augustinian nature that he's bringing forward, his namesake bringing forward, his understanding of the media, his understanding of new evangelization. These are all things on which Rosary Army was formed.
And he understands Americans.
So
that's pretty cool.
I think my only problem so far with him is that one proclamation that he made that all pizza going forward has to be Chicago deep dish. I don't think that's going to hold. I don't think that was right. That's not a unifying bridge. He didn't say that. That was a meme. Yeah. But and I will say, there was one Protestant that was tweeting me after Pope Francis was elected. Okay, Patrick.
Pope Francis.
When Pope Francis was elected, okay. Patrick was the only one who was texting me after that election. I'm having a lot of Protestants texting me right now. I mean, just a lot of my Protestant friends are texting me. They're like sending me memes. They're digging this dude. I mean, and so that's exciting to see. When I have people who I always felt like I had to walk on Catholic eggshells around them, that they're interested. I'm not talking about just Eric, who we mentioned last week, but others as well. Right. That I've heard from others that are just going, "Hey, what's going on with your?"
It feels like there's like a new electricity in the
exciting.
Air almost. Yeah. Like things just feel a little different, and hope is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah. And I'm very excited. I'm just very excited about our future, whatever it is. And we might have to endure some new trials, but I feel like, but I can go through them. It's fine. It's fine. It's going to be fine.
What are your thoughts if you're watching this, and if you're watching this on YouTube? What are your hopes for the future of the Pope? I think that's a fun topic to have because it makes us focus on hope versus what are your worries. That's one of the things that I've kind of enjoyed this week is like I'm not worried about things right now in regards to the church. I'm very hopeful in regards to things with the church. I'm hopeful for the way things are going right now. Our friend Father Jay Finelli posted a homily on his website. Did you get a chance to read it?
Yeah, I did. It was wonderful.
And he made some ties as well between Pope Leo the 13th writing the prayer to Saint Michael, tying that into our Blessed Mother at Fatima, and then the 100 years leading to now. I'll try to link to that as well. But he encouraged us as well. Father Jay said, "Let us storm heaven with our supplications." We need to be praying for the Pope right now. Pray for the protection of our Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, for the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, for the renewal and purification of the Church, for the conversion of sinners, and the peace of the world. And he finished it, "May our Heavenly Father hasten the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. May St. Michael defend Pope Leo XIV in the day of battle, and Our Lady of Fatima safely guide and guard our new Holy Father in these trying times." If you just say that prayer, if you just pray for those things right now, we're good to go. I'm excited because I feel like, kind of along the lines, I said this in a newsletter that I sent out last week, literally hours before the announcement of the Pope. We're looking for marching orders for Rosary Army. We are looking for our Holy Father to lead us into further battle. If we're an army, we're an army for the church, Rosary Army, that we need to know where are the battlegrounds and where do we need to go. And I think that's one of the things that, we appreciate your prayers as well. We didn't raise the money that we needed to do all the things we wanted to do this year. So things have been going a lot slower as I predicted they would because we haven't been able to have the resources to do what we want to do, but also slower because we have been waiting for this Pope to give us the marching orders. We're feeling energized. We're sort of bringing together our armory. We're trying to figure out where we're going to go from here. We don't know where it's going to be yet, but I'm hopeful. The fact that, hey, you're getting a show 2 weeks in a row, that's Pope Leo. He's got us excited. So I'm hopeful for this guy. There is that hesitation of like, well, let's see where it goes, or we can just trust God that God gave us the Pope we need. You keep using that phrase for times such as this. For times such as this is who's going to lead us into battle. And here we go. And so let's do it. So we'd love hearing from you. If you want to send us some feedback at rosaryarmy.com. Your comments are always wonderful to read on our YouTube channel. We have people watching us as well on Catholic TV. Hello to all you Catholic TV viewers and elsewhere. We're so grateful for the time that you spend with us each week or each time we put out a show. If you could please consider prayerfully supporting our apostolate, you can go to rosaryarmy.com/donate. Even though we just do a giving campaign once a year, we need your help 365 days of the year, and so that's greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for being here with us. As always, make them,
pray them,
and give them away. God bless, folks.